Welcome to the Health Row.
The Mexicans love it. Most people love it because it's got
A bit grim, I'm afraid to say. The annual progression of monarch butterflies in America, which is normally something like 80 billion members of the species, has dropped by 80%. And this is a pretty serious indication of what's going on worldwide. As we've mentioned in previous programs, you've probably noticed last summer that there weren't any insects on your windscreen of your cars, showing the intense problems that we have with the decimation of wildlife, particularly insect life right now. And I see the only answer is to boycott corporations who are causing this disaster. And I'm afraid, along with the usual suspects, poisoning insects using chemicals, and I'm talking specifically about the chemicals used in agriculture, it does seem that mobile phone companies are also implicated. Luckily, the good news is that a lot of countries are doing things about it. In India, Rajasthan, the whole state, and the city of Mumbai have just changed the laws to stop mobile phone companies putting their masts on top of hospitals and schools, for example, and actually in playgrounds. France is just preparing laws to pretty much outlaw it for children. Many countries now are stopping the child-friendly phone, and clearly the advice has to be try and keep your children away from them and try yourself not to use them if you can possibly help it. One of the worst things we can do is to use them in the car. I mean, you wouldn't put your head willingly in the microwave oven, but when you're in the car, you're enclosed very much like a microwave oven, and the mobile phone, which is a small microwave, acts like a heater and is slowly cooking you. Worse still, I think, is a bus or a train where there are many people with mobile phones, and that really is a place to get cooked. And I'm afraid we all need to reassess our usage of mobile phones because we have been inadvertently killing people. You know, I have to tell you that the vast majority of the brain cancer people that I've seen who've come asking how to get their health back, they've almost always had the mobile phone on the side that the tumour is developed under. Now, the World Health Organization say cancer is expected to increase by 70% in the next 20 years. This is despite the so-called progress that we read about every week in the newspapers. You do realize that really every wonder drug that's touted as the new cure for cancer, and people go into hospital and they're told, we've got this new wonder drug, this one's going to be the one that works. No, it hasn't been tested. You'll be one of the very first. You're incredibly lucky. All of them over the last 40 years have failed. All the interferons, all the interleukin-2s, all the ones that with the big names that got the big write-ups, they essentially didn't work. Now, let's look at placebos for a moment. As you probably know, blue placebos work far better than green placebos. And in many cases, placebos work something like 30% of the time. Now, when you look at the statistics for cancer survival, they are greatly distorted much of the time. They often compare the survival rate with something that's not accurate. I'll try and explain it. We have talked about it before. But essentially, if somebody's diagnosed 7 years, let's say there are two patients. One is diagnosed after 6 years. It's the type of cancer that has a 7-year progression. So They're diagnosed after 6 years, they live 1 year and die. And they say, oh dear, if only they'd been diagnosed earlier, we could have saved them. So what they do is they compare it. Here's another woman who has been diagnosed in the first, just after 1 year, when the cancer's still tiny. She gets treatment, she probably gets breasts removed, who knows what, but she dies on the same day 7 years later. But the authorities say, well, look, this one was diagnosed early, she lived 6 years. This one was diagnosed late, she only lived 1 year. And they use those false statistics to fool us that their treatments are working. The real statistics are available online, and it shows, unfortunately, about a 3% overall 5-year survival rate, not the high percentages we're told about. Something that's very important that everybody needs to look into. But back to placebos for a minute. If placebos are as effective as they are, you'd think that placebos, therefore, must have a higher success rate than chemotherapy. Placebos often work 30, let's be kind, 10% of the time. Chemo is working 3% of the time. Well, what's more powerful, chemo or the power of the mind? There was a brilliant bit of research done not that long ago where surgeons did what they call a sham knee operation. 200 patients, all needing the same knee operation. The group was divided in half. 100 had the normal knee surgery that they give, standard, usually quite successful. The other 100 people, they had a radial cut made around the knee so that neither group could tell who'd had the operation. The ones with the radial cut just had the cut, no operation at all. Who got better quicker? It was the group who thought they'd had the operation but hadn't. So, the power of the mind. Now, here's a story about a chap called Bill Townsend, who was a radio talk show host. His son had been put down for surgery for his tonsils, and there was a swelling from the adenoids, and he was getting a lack of sleep. Then his wife had chronic skin rashes, and they'd progressed all across the face, and she got the same adenoid swelling as her son. And so the doctor scheduled both of them for surgery on the same day. It was only when Bill started getting the same symptoms that he realized that there was something wrong, and he found out what it was. It was all the wireless devices in his house. One night, or the next, as soon as he realized, he switched off the mobile phone, he switched off the DECT phone, he switched off the Wi-Fi, and within days, well, before actually the operation was scheduled, his wife and son got better, and a short time after, he got better as well. So it's really, I believe, quite significant to keep in mind that you want to turn off all your Wi-Fi devices at night. Now, I was out last week doing some filming. I made several short films, and this morning I made one in a supermarket. I wanted to see just how safe their food actually was. But before I discuss that, I would very much like to show you a movie which I called a 5-minute salsa. And the idea is to show a friend of mine how easy it is to make a delicious salsa dish in 5 minutes. Because of the explanation, actually it took about 11 minutes, but I hope you'll forgive me there. And so now we'll show you this film.
Tomatoes and onions and chili and garlic, and it's so simple to make. So Kirsty is going to demonstrate, and she's never made salsa before.
Never, no.
So we're going to see if it can be done in 5 minutes and how delicious it's going to be. Chop.
Right, okay, so garlic, onions, pepper, tomatoes.
I won't watch it. It's
Don't
all
watch me, I'll get it all wrong if you watch me.
Well, no, you won't get it all right, but just go.
Can I get all the flavour from the chilies and the tomatoes? I don't have to use any spices?
You can use whatever you like. It's a wonderfully flexible medium. You could add basil, for instance, but there's no need. actually those simple ingredients, the tomato, the chilli, the onion, are absolutely delicious. You know, some red pepper, some green pepper, yellow pepper, orange pepper, whatever you like. Ultimately flexible.
I always think of sauce as a fresh product that you make up straight away, but we're actually talking about it as a fermented product.
When you go to the Mexican restaurants, for instance, it's got a sharp tanginess to it, and if it's made in the traditional way, it's going to be fermented. So you might want to discard the seeds, and remember not to rub your eyes after. So many times I've rubbed my eyes after cutting the chilli. I think I've learned now.
So we're looking for really finely chopped chilies here then?
I would, and you know, if you're going to give it to the kids, then maybe not too much chilli. It depends how strong that chilli is. But funnily enough, actually the fermentation process tends to take the top edge out of the power of chilies and garlic and so on. So I actually add more chilli and garlic and onion to a fermented dish than I would to a fresh dish sometimes. Actually, I'm not sure that's true. I think I'm
And tomatoes, how small here?
How chunky do you like your salsa?
Yeah.
You know, it's up to you, isn't it?
So I don't have to blend it, or just
No.
chop in?
No, all you've got to do is hold it under water and it will ferment. If you hold it under salted water, most people would feel it tastes nicer, and that salt has the advantage of keeping the bad bacteria that might float in from the air at bay. So I like to add some salt, just enough salt to taste, you know. So in a jar the size there that you're planning to use, probably a teaspoonful of salt will be adequate. And of all the different salts you could use, I'd recommend Celtic salt, which is just pure, dried, natural ocean, as the best salt you could get.
So there's a big fear around salt, with all who don't have salt, but actually when we're going for these mineral salts like the Celtic sea salt, what's the advantage?
Well, the Celtic salt is just pure dried ocean, whereas the sea salts you see in the supermarket have been highly processed. We just assume that a natural sea salt that's white and dry and fluffy is normal, but actually it's a long way from normal. If you dry out in the Atlantic Ocean, what you get left with is wet and grey salt. So the companies, the famous companies that we all know the names of, what they do is they superheat the salt and they remove the magnesium, which makes it wet. And in removing the magnesium, they're also removing the other water-soluble minerals. And you're left with a white, fluffy salt, which is 1,000,000 miles away from natural dried sea. And you know, our ancestors really valued salt in Roman times. It was worth roughly the same as gold, because the Romans knew if you didn't have enough salt, you died.
Okay. Now I've probably got about...
Okay,
more tomatoes?
I would suggest it's a bit heavy on the onions, but maybe
Yeah,
not. A
okay,
couple more
that's
tomatoes and then some peppers.
Okay. Oh, and some peppers, okay.
Yeah. No, you probably don't have to take any out. I think you've got the amount just nice. So how do you tell a good tomato? Well, it's dark red as opposed to anemic Euro tomato colour.
So what about these green tomatoes which have been artificially ripened by passing through a gas? How do we avoid those?
By not buying them. You know, buy your vegetables from the grower as opposed to a supermarket like Deathco. Sorry, I lisp. So I suggest that we're probably coming towards about 3 or 4 minutes. I'm not really sure, but it looks like you're almost done. You know, all you've got to do is now mix all that up, shove it in the jar, push it down hard so you get the air bubbles out, cover it with delicious salt water, and so long as everything's under the salt water, it will ferment. If it's sticking out above the top, it will go mouldy. You know, what our ancestors often used to do is they'd put some round shape that roughly fitted that, maybe they'd use actually a slightly wider mouthed jar. That would be easier. That one's got a lip on it, which isn't in your service so much. But what they usually do, if it's a wide mouthed jar, then they might put a plate, a small saucer, say, on top with a rock to hold it down. You know, all you're aiming to do is make sure that everything is under the water rather than sticking out on top.
So again, I just want my filtered water with the salt in.
Yeah, I mean, ideally you might as well fill the jar and top up some more. You know, you could you've got some cucumbers there, you could make it multicoloured. You know, you can make these things very pretty because you do it in layers. You have yellow pepper, bit of cucumber, you know, green layer, then a red layer, then a white layer, and you can make these jars very, very colourful if you want to.
Okay.
You know, you got a carrot, you could also put in carrot.
So when I'm filling with water, just to cover it, just enough to cover it?
You want the minimum amount of water and salt.
Amount of water. I'm going to take it back out because of
Well, I put more in. You know, ideally, whenever you make this stuff, you really want to fill the jar.
Yeah,
Ideally.
I've chopped enough there. I'm no expert chopping veg. It's just the.
But nevertheless, 3, 4, 5 days time, that's going to taste really nice. I mean,
so I've
really,
got quite a
really
bit of water on the top there.
Yeah, so I put more
So you put more
solid
veggie.
ingredients in to
Okay.
fill up the jar.
Yeah, okay.
And
So lid on that, a bit more ingredients for now, but lid on that and then...
yeah, I mean, I'd taste it first to make sure you think it's salty enough. Because, you know, one wants a nice savoury flavour with a vegetable pickle. But what might surprise you is how much the children go for it. Particularly when it's young.
Well, I was thinking if I could get them to make it, they might have more interest in tasting.
Exactly, that's the whole key. Is that nice?
Yeah, yeah, it's nice and fresh.
So
Put some more pepper.
it's going to get zingy in
Yeah.
3, 4 days time. It's amazing. Sometimes I make these things and just after 24 hours it's tasting, it tastes better.
So a warm place?
Well, the warmer the place you put it in, the quicker it's going to ferment.
Okay. And again, so check it after 3 days. If you want a bit more, go for the 7, and then you're happy with it there in the fridge.
You know, depending on whether it's a cold environment or a warm environment, you may find it in a very short time it's done, or it may, if you're in a very cold environment, it might take quite a few more days.
Is that it? Is that all?
Well, now the thing is that there are little bits sticking up above the water.
Okay.
You don't want that.
Right, so...
One way or another, you need to keep everything underwater. So you need to use something. You could use a sacrificial leaf off a cabbage or something.
So this is what I do with the sauerkraut. I do exactly the same with the salsa then, yeah?
Yes, but imagine this was fuller.
Yeah.
Then all you've got to do is just put a little bit. Now you've got a big space to fill.
Yeah.
It's much far, but look, I just chop a few more.
Okay.
Just top it up, and then it's easy. So you have this leaf as a sacrificial leaf. You put it on the top, and okay, if a bit of it sticks up above the water, it doesn't matter. You're going to throw it away anyway. But you're using this as a plug to hold everything down under the water, so all of this will ferment without going mouldy. It's wonderfully simple. It's so quick.
Okay.
Chopping and that's it.
Brilliant.
You know, as most of us know, you can taste this raw now, but it's really quite nice.
No, it did. It was fresh actually. Now, I'm not a big tomato fan, but I do like it in salsa and things. But I tasted it then and I was like, oh no, that's good quality ingredients. Obviously make the difference.
Well, absolutely. You know, I try to buy organic if I possibly can, but also, you know, we can grow it. If you've got a back garden, try growing the easy stuff. You know, potatoes can be so ridiculously easy. You don't even have to plant them. Do you know, if you plant potatoes just on the ground and you cover them with something like straw, but you know, deep, they'll just send the roots down into the soil. You don't even have to dig the soil. The potatoes will do their own digging. Then you just take off the straw and there you've got all the potatoes.
Do you know, these tomatoes are amazing and it's so nice to see that the juice is just absolutely running out of them. So I know for a fact they're not the unripened tomatoes which have been artificially reddened. They're fantastic. I think that's why for somebody who doesn't like tomato, I'm just going to taste it again. I could probably eat that now.
Well, yes,
You know, it's
exactly.
great. So the leaf on the top.
Yeah. The key is just remember.
Pack it down.
Yeah.
Nipping above the water.
When be careful as you're packing it, because you don't want to get any of the bits up. Right? So that's perfect.
Right.
Now, you might as well just top it up with more salt water up to the top.
Okay.
And then put the lid on, put it in a dark place, you're done.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and if any of the bits are sticking up above the water and you see them going mouldy for some reason, just chuck them out.
Okay.
Everything below will be just fine. And remember to put a little bowl under it, because the pressure of the fermentation.
Yeah, I'm a squirt here, but I'm so proud of that. It's fantastic.
It's so easy.
Brilliant, yeah, love it.
Well done.
Thank you. That's fantastic. I've learned so much.
You did it all.
Well, I hope that inspired you to perhaps have a go yourself. It really is incredibly easy, and one can use pretty much any ingredients you like. And we're going to be doing one of those little film clips every week to show you again how to make really quick, easy stuff that's hugely good for you. I mean, the great thing about fermented vegetables is you're creating a little factory, creating B vitamins and probiotics and so on. Really one of the most healthful things you could do. And our ancestors got through cold winters by eating fermented foods. It really is a vital and important part of having a healthy immune system. Now, people say, well, do I need to take supplements? Surely food's got all the minerals and vitamins I need in there. And I'm sure really you know that that's not the case, that these days, because of the immense hybridization of plants. Wheat used to be 13 foot tall, now it's about knee high. And in changing things, hybridizing them to such a degree, a lot of the goodness is lost. And I brought on today some figures from comparing food from 1940 to 1991. Now, just in the last few years since 1991, over the last, 12, 13 years, things have changed dramatically. Foods have plummeted in their quality, but just listen to the mineral comparisons between 1940 and 1941. Runner beans, okay? Sodium, 100% loss. Spinach, 53% loss of potassium. Potatoes, 36% loss of potassium. Broccoli, 75% loss of calcium. Spring onions, 74% loss of calcium. And it goes on and on. Magnesium in carrots, 75% less than it used to be. With tomatoes, in 1991, you had to eat 10 tomatoes to have the equivalent of one tomato back in 1940. But they've been hybridizing and putting chemicals on the land here in England anyway, since the middle of the 19th century. So for 150 years, you can imagine probably just one slice of tomato in 1850 might have been the equivalent to the one tomato in 1940 and the 10 in 1991. How many tomatoes do we need to eat now? 20 to get the goodness of one in 1940. So what's gone wrong? Well, we're being fed seedless, quick to grow, slow to deteriorate type food. Taste and health and mineral content have been disregarded to a callous degree. I think what's been going on in the world of agriculture is simply criminal. We're being fed really poisoned goods, and it's pretty serious. I mean, potatoes, during a 51-year period, carrots have lost 75% of their magnesium, 48% of their calcium, 46% of their iron, 75% of their copper. Potatoes have lost 30% of the magnesium, and so on and on. It's ridiculous. So, of course, we can't get the food nutrition that we need. Now, what are we? We're what we eat. Your brain's yesterday's lunch. We're what we feed. If we've got parasites, we may be feeding the parasites. And we are what we think. Increasingly, I'm becoming very much aware that your thoughts happen. And it's very important to keep them under control. Your self-thoughts and your thoughts about others. One of the reasons that Socrates became so well liked is that he said, look, before you ask a question, think 3 questions of yourself. 1, is what I am going to say true? Do I know it to be true? If I'm saying it to somebody, will what I'm saying benefit them? And thirdly, if I'm saying it about somebody, is what I'm saying going to benefit them? And these simple rules make things a lot easier with your own self-talk as well. First of all, if you find that you're worrying about something, say to yourself, do I know this to be true? Because most fears and worries, of course, are just that. They're fear. Most of them are not known to be true. Will it help the person who's going to hear it? Well, that's you. Clearly, if you're worrying and getting into fear, it's not going to help you. So Socrates is worth a little look at. He was pretty good. And one of the other people who was around for a long time was Hippocrates. Now, Hippocrates said, if I can't cure it with medicine, by which he meant plants and herbs, I can cure it with surgery. And what I can't cure with surgery, I can cure with hypothermia. Now, hypothermia, of course, by that he meant steam baths, getting heat into the body, because if you want to get well and you're not well, the body automatically creates heat. Let's say that there's an overwhelming flu, for example, the body very obligingly makes a high temperature, which kills off the flu and you recover. Now, I started listening to this concept some years back when, first of all, my business partner and then a medical doctor who I was working with somewhat at the time both told me in the same week about a machine made by a company called Indiba, a Spanish company. And it was explained to me that it was essentially a Tesla healing device brought into the 20th century at that point. And when Tesla was using this sort of device, he used spark gaps. And you'd adjust the gap of the spark, and that would change the frequency that was being given out by this device. Anyway, it took about a year of being told it was incredible for me actually to take the plunge and buy one. And we should be able to see a picture of one that I started with. It cost me, I think, about £1,200. And it was built in probably the 90s. And I got it home, and I didn't have any instructions with it, but I had a pretty good idea what to do with it. There's nothing to it. There's only one knob. And anyway, there was a knock at the door, and it was one of my neighbours. And they'd said they hadn't been able to turn their neck like that for 3 months because it had locked solid. Doctor couldn't do anything, and they weren't able to drive. So I'd never used the machine before, no instructions. So I used it on the back of his neck for 5 minutes. And after 5 minutes, he did that and said, wow, that's fixed it, something along those lines. Anyway, a couple of days later, I was invited up to London. And I'm sitting there, and a few people know what I do. So this chap is brought over to me, and boy, did he look ill. He was really, really looking awful. And I asked him what had happened, and he said, well, 40 years earlier, he'd been working at a DJ in the Roundhouse in London, and he'd seen a stack of speakers that were going to tumble over and kill this girl. And he managed to rush towards it and prop the speakers up, but in doing so, he'd crushed 3 vertebrae in his back. And he explained that it was 40 years, but the last 10 years he'd had real difficulty, and the only reason he'd come out that night was because he was taking a massive dose of morphine. Anyway, I remembered I had the machine in the back of the car, so I got the machine, got him to just bend forward so I could get access to his back, and I worked on his back for about 45 minutes. And because I've got a little bit of hypnotic background, I was able to give him some positive suggestions that, I don't know whether this will work, but there is a reasonable chance that you're going to find some improvement, just positive stuff. Anyway, he gets up and he says, it's gone. And this is after 40 years. It had gone. It's only the second time I've used the machine. I still haven't read the instruction book. So it was pretty amazing. And I said to him, look, I don't really know what we've achieved here, but I think maybe you're like an unbaked cake, partly baked cake, and I think you should take it really easy. And anyway, I leave, and it's a party, and he rings me at 8 o'clock the next morning, not 1 minute to 8, 1 minute past 8 o'clock, so I realised there was an issue. And he says, Clive, I had the most amazing time last night. He said, I haven't danced for 10 years. And he said, I danced till 4 in the morning. And I went, oh my God. And he said, now I'm in more pain than I was yesterday. come round immediately. So I went round again with the machine, spent about 10, 15 minutes on his back, and again got him out of pain. And he stayed out of pain for about 3 years, and then he was getting twinges again, so I used the machine again, 5 minutes or something, and he was out of pain again. Now, I spoke to him a couple of months ago, and he's still out of pain. And he's in his 70s-ish, something like that. Anyway, I'm not saying this works every time on everybody like that, but more often than you'd think credible, it works. I had another client who was a stuntman, and for a stuntman, he was really quite clumsy. And so he knew, because he'd been damaging himself for years, how long and how serious it was and how long it would take to repair. And he reckoned that this machine was reducing his repair time and pain time by, something like 80, 90%. Sometimes I could get him right out of pain. It's not dissimilar to the pain genie that we demonstrated when Richard Cumbers was on a few sessions ago. Now, the pain genie is much less expensive, about 450 quid, compared to one of these. One of these new can be quite expensive. Now, we're going to show the next picture of a more modern one. And this is one that is a huge advance on the one that I was using. This one will penetrate much quicker, much faster. It's incredible in every way. And they're using them around the country. I mean, in Harrods, for instance, in the beauty department, I think you pay 150 quid for half an hour. You can have a session to get rid of your wrinkles. And I gave my old machine to a friend of mine who was going for an interview with the record company the next morning. She wanted to look younger. She was about 33 or something. So I sat down, she used the machine on herself, on her face, and I could honestly say that half the wrinkles were gone after an hour. It was really quite dramatic. So there are many uses for it. Essentially, you're creating an artificial fever. So it tends to trigger the body to go into self-repair for a start. Triggering a fever makes the whole body go into reset, and it's looking for what's wrong. It's triggering neuropeptides, it's flooding electrons into the body, and also it's flooding in frequency. These machines run at about 450,000 hertz, and because of resonance, you haven't got that one frequency, you've got a whole host of resonant frequencies, and Tesla understood this. There are many multi-frequency devices, like the Rife device we did a program with John Wright about 2 or 3 programs ago, which is so inexpensive, £65. So huge differences in price. The one that you'll see in the picture of the lady lying down, they're anything up to £15,000. However, the things that it can do are really worth understanding. I have seen people sent home to die. Sent home to die, they've written their will, they've given the goodbye party, they're waiting to die. They took supplements, changed their diet, used these sorts of machines, and I've seen people get clean bills of health. Frequency is everything. Every cell in our body, every different organ in our body is working at a different frequency. Parasites have a frequency. The Rife machine we were talking about 2 programs ago, you can set the machine to the frequency of a parasite and it just explodes. You can just get rid of it. Then you need to drink a lot of water to flush it out of your system. Many ways to deal with the parasites that we're all feeding. Essential oils, also another fabulous way to deal with it. Now, one of the reasons I mention this frequency device is we have a sort of one-off situation where one of the really high-quality ones, and these are ones that will go, they will go to any point in the body, right deep inside, will fix all sorts of very, very interesting positions. I have one that I'm selling on behalf of a client, and if anybody's interested in that, they can email me at clive@ancientpurity.com, and I can give them the details because it's much cheaper than normal. I just wanted you to appreciate that. Now, I'd like to talk about one or two things that are really damaging people. I mentioned I went into the supermarket to make a film. First thing I picked up was bread. Now, Hovis, for example, used to be, I believe, a fairly wholesome product when I was young, it used to say British whole wheat. Then they changed it to, I'm sorry, let me start again. It used to say whole wheat. Then they changed it to 100% whole wheat. Then they changed it to 100% British whole wheat, which meant it's no longer whole wheat, but it is 100% British. Now they've changed it to whole meal. So when you look at bread, like Hovis and like almost every other packaged bread in the shop, you will find that it says that it's partly wholemeal, or even white bread. It's partly wheat, but 43%, 46%, something like that is soya. And you don't want your bread made of soya. Your ancestors didn't make bread out of soya. Soya is not a healthy human food unless it's fermented. But even then, as 98% of the world's soya is now genetically modified, I don't think we can trust soya anymore. It's causing a lot of problems. Bread is causing a lot of people problems now. Bread's different to the way it was 10 years ago. Different drastically from how it was 20 years ago. It's not what we think it is now. And many, many people, particularly people with type O blood groups, need to see how they feel if they give up bread for a couple of weeks. If you could give up bread, possibly even for a day, you're going to find that if you eat some one day later, before you eat it, take your pulse. You may well find that after you've eaten the bread, a few minutes later, your pulse is racing comparatively. Maybe it's gone up 10 points. That's an allergic reaction. But it doesn't always happen that quickly. Sometimes if you give up anything that you think you may be allergic to for 2 weeks, take your pulse, eat a little bit of it, and then after a few minutes, if it's gone up by 10 points or something like that, you're having an allergic reaction. It's as simple as that. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to be allergic for life, but it may be for 3 months you've got to come off the wheat. And then if you do go back onto it again, eat much less of it, because our ancestors didn't eat this quantity that we do now. Prepare it properly, ideally sprout the grains, then bake them. Huge difference in the quality and how we react to it. But our ancestors, not only did they soak the grains usually, but they proved the bread at least overnight. Sometimes with sourdough, they might have left it for 3 days. And over that period of time, it completely changes the chemical constituents of the bread, making it essentially safe, as opposed to all the supermarket bread, which is made and baked right away. And you're not dealing with the gluten elements, the gliadins, their various components, which old-fashioned bread making using old-fashioned varieties. These modern varieties really are causing a lot of problems, huge problems, and they're causing arthritis, almost every disease, fibromyalgia, almost everything you can think of. So my recommendation to anybody is, at the very least, come off wheat and go to rye. If you have porridge for breakfast and you're having oats, at least soak it overnight. Some steps that need to be taken. If you're interested in this sort of subject, there's a brilliant book by Sally Fallon called Nourishing Traditions. And basically she studied native foods that everybody used to eat, grown locally, and what were the sacred foods, the foods that the women before they got pregnant used to eat, the foods that the men before they took their part ate. Very important knowledge, which has just been lost. The value particularly of fermented vegetables. So another thing I'd like to bring to your attention are the modern light bulbs. As soon as I realized that the government was giving us these light bulbs for free to start with, I realized it's a con. They're phasing out all the old light bulbs. You try going into the supermarket buying a light bulb now, it's £4.75 or something, where it used to be 3 for 60p. We've been deliberately fooled. And the problem is that if you get one of those mercury-filled light bulbs, and all those modern energy-saving ones, they're full of mercury. If you break one, the poison suggestion is that you must destroy the carpet. Be very careful, don't breathe it in, because the mercury will be in the carpet or the rug forever. It's in the air, so you've certainly got to have to vacate the room. It's incredible that they have provided the world and made it illegal to use old light bulbs with these things. You put them in the dustbin and it breaks. It goes into the water table. It goes where they bury the rubbish. We're polluting the world with mercury. How are we ever going to deal with all these light bulbs? It's insanity. Not only that, when they tell you it's energy efficient, bear in mind that they didn't measure the heat. So in winter, those old light bulbs, they gave brightness and a significant amount of heat. These new ones, they say, oh, they're so much more efficient. Well, that's because there's no heat coming off. So in winter we lose. In summer we maybe win. In winter we lose, but if we break it, the entire planet loses. So it's ridiculous. Let me tell you something else ridiculous that's going on, which is very annoying. Pasteurization of foods, pasteurization of drinks. It's becoming ridiculous. Let me give you an example. If you milk a cow, pasteurize the milk, give it to a baby cow, the baby cow will not thrive. It might even die. It's that serious. So we've taken a completely live food, living food, full of incredibly healthy components for all species of mammal. Even though it's a cow, actually a goat and a sheep would be increasingly more natural to the humans. But even cow's milk, if it's unpasteurized, is hugely healing. It's hard to get raw milk, but it's possible if you go online. It's easy to get raw cheese, unpasteurized cheese, and Waitrose sell unpasteurized butter. We need to be going for this. We need to be understanding how our ancestors ate. They ate unpasteurized. And in winter, when the ground was solid and there wasn't much to eat, there was always lots of cows to milk, and the cheeses that we've been making. We would, in hard winters, have been eating a lot of dairy produce, I believe, a lot of fermented foods, because the ground was frozen for months and months not long ago. Now, I'd like to show you another picture, and I'd like to tell you about Disney. I'd like to tell you about what happened to us as the human race. There we were, thousands of years ago. We were living in the forest. We'd always lived there. We knew where everything was. We knew where the safe stuff was. We knew where the dangerous animals were. And one day, somebody arrived in our forest and said, well, this forest is ours now. Not only that, you're going to call us kings. And we're going to teach your children that being a king is normal and that princesses are wonderful and that we should all aspire to being princes and princesses. And princess mania clearly has been ruling for quite a long time now. The books have been written about princes and princesses, the films have been made, and I think you might, if you've got really, really sharp eyes, spot the difference between the Disney film there and the Disney film on the other side, both fictions which people seem to love buying into. Now, I would love to believe that the monarchy are there in our best interests, but I believe that the definition of slavery is where the slave master takes all the money and the slave is left with just enough to get by. No time to think, no time to rebel, just enough to get by. But in the good old days of slavery, I think they gave you a free place to live. Now you've got to get a mortgage and get shackled to that on top. And, okay, enough about that, I think. Now, this Saturday, 2:30 in the afternoon, if any of you are near the Brighton area, I'm giving a talk along with Richard Cumbers. We're going to be talking specifically about health. We're going to be demonstrating the pain genie to anybody who wants to experience just how ludicrously incredible it is and how quick it works. And that's at the Friends Meeting House in Brighton. That's in the Lanes, Friends Meeting House. It's in Ship Street in Brighton. £5 to get in, or free if you can't afford £5. Please do come, bring everybody you know. Next on the list, we've had some very interesting responses from some of the previous shows. The biggest response we've had by far has been people telling us what the MSM, the sulfur that Patrick McGeehan told us about, is like. And I've had people telling me the most incredible things. And if you haven't tried it or you haven't heard Patrick McGeehan's program about it, really do try it. And bear in mind, we were selling sulfur in the past, and I was recommending the same dosages that Patrick was, but nobody got that result. We were using OptiMSM, which I'd come to believe was the best at the time. But there's a difference. There's a difference. And anyway, please understand there is an interesting difference. Very important, if you do try the MSM, take a teaspoonful, 5 grams in the morning, teaspoonful, 5 grams before bed. Do not take less than that, because then you just get the poisons halfway out and you can't get them all the way out. It is necessary to take that as a minimum. You can take more. My business partner's taking 20 grams, and he's, I think, even more now. And he says it's the best supplement he's ever tried, ever. Better than fulvic minerals, which almost everybody agrees that was the best supplement out. But the MSM seems to be taking the next step. Now, we had Mark Serkis on a show a couple of shows ago, and I was expecting to be overwhelmed with demand for the magnesium flakes, because the magnesium flakes are the difference between life and death. If you've got a heart issue, if you've got blood pressure issues, if you've got cancer issues, if you've got anxiety issues, panic attacks, you can't sleep properly, all you've got to do, and it's been done for centuries and centuries and centuries, is to calm down in a magnesium bath. So we sell sacks of it. You can buy 5 kilos. You want at least half a kilo probably in a bath. You want to start off less. Don't have it in the morning. Have it in the evening, because it's so relaxing. You're not going to want to do very much after you've had a magnesium bath. Watch the program with Mark Serkis. Learn a little bit about magnesium baths. But that's why people used to go to the spas, Baden-Baden or whatever, to take the waters to get the magnesium benefits. Anyway, because we haven't been selling nearly as much as I thought we should, because it's so incredible, I've asked the office tomorrow morning to reduce the price of the 25-kilo sack significantly. So I hope they'll bring it down really, really low so that you can experience magnesium baths, because all of us are stressed these days. And what happens when you get stressed is your cortisol levels rise. It's, when we were in the jungle, before the kings arrived, let's say that out of our peripheral vision, we caught an animal, right? We got about 45 seconds to get out of its way, or we're breakfast. So what happens is that the adrenaline immediately switches on full. The body turns off digestion. It turns off thinking. It turns off everything except muscle power. And you've got 45 seconds to sprint or fight the lion or whatever it is. And then it would have taken a little while for the levels to settle down, and we'd go back to the calm, everything's all right in the forest. But these days, because everything about life most of the time is so stressful, you watch TV, it's really stressful. You go to work, half the time it's stressful. Just getting to work is stressful. Trying to feed the family is stressful. Everything's stressful. Many people are on adrenal overload. They're so flooded with adrenaline, they're not turning off. They're flooded with cortisol, they're not turning off. They're not sleeping properly. They're not getting enough energy. All these things are based, perhaps in this instance, from the adrenal glands and the stress. What is the best de-stressor I know? Magnesium. Having a magnesium bath, there's probably nothing to beat it. And you see, if you've de-stressed, then you have a good night's sleep, and you say in the morning, I'm going to be so grateful to get up in the morning, so I'm going to be doing this and that, and I'm going to do it well, and I'm going to enjoy it. Then you wake up with that thought in your mind, and the magnesium has de-stressed your entire body mentally and physically. And as I say, if you haven't tried it, try it. You may have tried our magnesium spray, which is another way to get it on, but in comparison to just soaking in half a kilo of it, to 2 different levels of enjoyment, and both are fantastic. Now, the next thing I'd like to mention is about what one can put together. And I've been reading a little bit about putting together the MSM, the sulfur, with fulvic minerals. So I've been experimenting in the morning, having a glass of the vitamin C mixed with the MSM, mixed with the fulvic minerals, in a large glass of water. Hydration's important, particularly with fulvic minerals, because you've got to flush everything out. MSM likewise. Now, I prefer to use the supernatural C. We've now called it fruit vitamin C. But I think, having taken advice from Tony Pantalaresco and others, I would be perhaps mixing it half and half with the ascorbic acid, or if you prefer, sodium ascorbate, which would be ascorbic acid with bicarbonate mixed together. Or you can use a product that's being increasingly popular, I noticed from the website, which is liposomal vitamin C, which is oil-coated vitamin C that's many, many times more potent than ordinary vitamin C. It's important to know, for those of you who've got a liquidizer, that you can make it yourself. You can get the ordinary sodium ascorbate or sodium ascorbic acid, or sodium ascorbate either, put it in the liquidizer with water and some sunflower lecithin, and also ways to do it with oils, and you can blend up your own liposomal coating. Problem is it only lasts a few days because it oxygenates, so you need to make it regularly. But just to know, you don't have to spend all that money on a liposomal product ready-made. You can make it yourself. And if you're interested in that, Tony Pantalaresco on his YouTube videos has a brilliant how to do it video on that one, probably more than one, in fact. So before I finish off, I'd like to quote Pablo Picasso, who said, the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away. And I hope that some of you may be inspired to find your gift with this program, because the advice that we've been trying to give is life-saving. You know, people need to know that they don't have to die of so many unfortunate problems that people are dying from now. You know, 150 years ago, cancer, heart attacks, type 1 diabetes practically never happened. These are all recent events in our history, because we've been eating the food, eating the chemicals, and now it has to stop. Now the corporations have to understand that they have to stop using the chemicals. We have to stop destroying the planet. And the only way it's going to change is that we have to vote the politicians out and boycott, if necessary, all the corporations until they realize that they are our servants. All these people, government, corporations, are supposed to be our servants. It's not working that way. They've forgotten the definition of servant, and we need to remind them in a gentle, peaceful way that we can run our own affairs. We don't need Europe telling us what to do. We don't need wars on many continents. We don't need to do anything but bring our troops home. They can look after us here. They can help garden. They can help convert all the land that hasn't been poisoned by chemicals back into market gardens. We can start growing the old varieties of fruits and vegetables. We can rip up the car parks at supermarkets and plant fruit trees and nut trees everywhere. Free food should be the norm. I was in Portland, Oregon 10 years ago, and many of the communities were growing fruits and vegetables right there in their front gardens. And it was beautiful. Signs with "help yourself, I've got lots of tomatoes." And anybody who's grown vegetables will know that there's a constant glut of everything at the right time. And I see fruit falling off trees, and nobody's picking it up to eat it. But they're going to supermarkets and paying £3 for a kilo of the apples that are dropping off somebody's trees. And there are websites now about sharing produce, and you'll easily find them, because when I had lucky enough to have an apple tree in my garden, I really wish that there were people who wanted it. But even putting them outside in the street, people just seem to have got used to the idea of paying £3. But these were the old varieties, the ones with seeds in, the really good ones, the ones that you could smell from up the street. And I really advise anybody who's got a garden, start planting, because we're wasting a lot of money on food that we could so easily be growing. Children love planting, love growing. A little bit of effort put in digging at the beginning pays a lot of dividends later. It's all about the preparation. And if anybody's going down to the gym, why don't you, instead of going down to the gym, why don't you find somebody who's got a back garden who'd love you to come and dig their garden? Weeding, digging, it's fantastic, it's real. It's not getting on a treadmill and running into nowhere for half an hour. Get real, guys. Nobody's going to change the world unless we do. And I suggest you watch on YouTube a video called Clean Up Estonia, where 3 million people of Estonia in one day cleaned all the waste through the entire country. If we did that, because our population is so much greater, think how much 10 million people could do in a day if they, for instance, decided to change everything. We could plant so many food trees, food plants, all across the world all across England, say, in one day, just like Todmorden. If you don't know about Todmorden, the village of Todmorden has planted plants so that everybody can eat them for free access all over the place, every roundabout, every grass verge, everywhere with the council's blessing. It started off without the blessing. 2 women started planting, then the council saw, wow, free food. We should have free food. And every village, every town, every neighbourhood, we could, if necessary, we could take out the paving stones and plant cherry trees and plum trees. Look how beautiful streets are when they've got rows of cherry trees, but they're always the ornamental ones. I think it would be more fun to have peach trees, apricot trees, cherry trees, walnut trees, whatever will grow. The streets would be beautified and we'd have free food. We wouldn't have to work so hard because the food's really expensive. Churchill, at the end of the war, said, what's the biggest mistake England made? And Churchill replied, losing food security. And we were growing a lot then. People were the healthiest in the last century at that very time that they were growing their own food. Just before, just after, and ever since, it's got worse and worse and worse. So I encourage you, I was an organic farmer, I had a small organic farm. I was earning double what my neighbours were. I saw them poison their land with chemicals because the EU was giving it to them, the equivalent of 50 cents, 50p for a 25 sack. It was corruption, bribery, and I saw whole fields died because they put too much on. They didn't really understand what they were doing. And I saw them get ill. And our ancestors didn't get ill because they ate organic, they ate natural. But bear in mind that organic doesn't mean much these days. I went into Waitrose, I picked up Prince Charles's tea. It said 90% organic, 97% organic, 3% permitted non-organic ingredients. So organic isn't organic, and if those organic ingredients had been grown on soil which previously had been poisoned with chemicals, well, all the life in that soil's dead. It's too late. So do think ahead. The assault on us is growing. The food is getting worse. We need to do something now, and it takes one at a time. Please do, if you are inspired by these videos, please do share them. Please do put them out there, because hardly anybody knows that we're making these videos. And possibly the one to start with is episode 5, where I spoke with Lou Collins, and we covered an awful lot of ground there. Episode 3 is interesting. Well, I think they're all interesting, pretty much. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.